Exterior forest clearing, day. A strange little furry face with huge black eyes comes slowly into view. The creature is an Ewok by the name of Wicket. He seems somewhat puzzled and prods Leia with a spear.
Cut it out!
Behind the notoriously unbearable heat of that Ewok costume was an excitable, eager-to-please character actor by the name of Warwick Davis. At just 12 years old, and then at a height of 2'11", Warwick played Wicket the Ewok in Star Wars Episode VI Return of the Jedi, the third installment of what was to be one of the most successful and popular film franchises ever to grace the screen. Since then, Warwick has made a career out of small parts, both figuratively and literally. Sometimes you saw his face, sometimes not. You've probably seen him in a movie, but didn't realize it was him from all the pounds of makeup and prosthetics he had to wear. Warwick Ashley Davis was born on February 3rd, 1970 in Surrey, England. His father, Ashley Davis, sold insurance, while his mother, Susan Davis, had jobs as a secretary and personal assistant, as well as taking care of Warwick and his younger sister. Warwick almost didn't survive the first days of his infancy. He was born with a rare form of dwarfism known as, and I'm going to try and say this right, spondylopiphyseal dysplasia congenita, which is helpfully abbreviated to SED. Doctors told his parents he would constantly need the help of a wheelchair and would probably die young. They were wrong on both counts. Contrary to what doctors predicted, Warwick spent his childhood with an almost infinite amount of energy. In Warwick's autobiography, Size Matters Not, which I'll be referring to a lot throughout this episode, Warwick writes, "I was a real handful, a tightly wound ball of rubberized energy that bounced around the house and garden at giddying speeds. If I wasn't swinging from lampshades, I was charging my bike through stacks of cardboard boxes, copying the Dukes of Hazzard." In 1977, when Warwick was just 7 years old, he saw the first Star Wars film in theaters with a friend, and like every kid in his generation, instantly fell in love with it. Then in 1982, Warwick's grandmother heard a casting call on the radio for little people for the next episode in the Star Wars franchise, Revenge of the Jedi, as it was called then. His grandmother told his parents, who called the studio and got him an audition. They were looking for little people to play Ewok children, and upon seeing Warwick's height at 2'11", a production assistant said he'd do just fine and sent him to the wardrobe department for his measurements. Just like that, he was cast in a Star Wars movie at just 12 years old. I guess he was technically cast as an extra to begin with if they cast him as an Ewok child, but it didn't matter how big the part was. He loved every minute of it. Some of the other little people who were playing Ewoks hated it. The work days were long, the costumes were hot and uncomfortable, the heads were hard to see out of because the eyes would fog up, so the actors would end up tripping and fumbling over each other. But Warwick loved it and didn't want it to end. I mean, think about it, it's like a kid's dream come true. While others complained, Warwick was front and center, ready to do anything he was asked. Warwick writes, "While the older Ewok actors groaned and begged for 30 minutes rest, I hopped up and down, eager to prove I was feeling fine, and pleaded, 'Please can we keep killing stormtroopers?' In one particular scene, Warwick improvised and approached R2-D2 to poke and prod at him curiously. Richard Marquand, the director, noticed Warwick doing this, liked it, and decided to add an extra scene focusing on it. All the other actors were just doing as they were told, but Warwick, because he had never been on a set before, felt free to explore whenever the cameras were rolling. Because of his on-set behavior, the crew was beginning to take notice of him, in a good way. Mark Hamill even took a liking to him and bought him every Star Wars figure that he didn't already have. It was probably Warwick's tendency to stand out that led David Tomblin, the first assistant director, to approach Warwick and ask him to play the role of Wicket the Ewok in a big scene with Carrie Fisher. Kenny Baker, who plays R2-D2, was supposed to do it, but came down with food poisoning. So just like that, Warwick rose through the ranks of his Ewok brethren and had a scene with the lead actress. As Wicket the Ewok, Warwick was great. Acting on instinct and impulse and drawing some personality from his own dog, Warwick's portrayal of Wicket was the audience's first introduction to the Ewok race, and he did them justice.
Look, it's a hat. It's not gonna hurt you, look. You're a jittery little thing, aren't you?
Also during the filming of Return of the Jedi, David Tomblin directed Warwick in a promotional short film called Return of the Ewok. To this day, Star Wars fans see it as a fun curiosity, kind of like the Star Wars holiday special.
Chewbacca, we were so relieved to hear you were all right.
All of you are an important part of my life, pal. I'm glad I could be here.
It was never officially finished or released, but through the tenacity of Star Wars fans, it's managed to stick around. The whole film is pretty much Warwick playing himself, leaving home to become an actor. The plot is really an excuse to just have Warwick interact with all the characters and locations of the Star Wars universe in a goofy, campy way.
Go, Mike, you can do it!
Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, and Carrie Fisher all played themselves. Even his parents were in it. They show up in the end to pick him up from Endor and take him back to Earth.
Oh, right, there you are. Hello, Mum. Hello, Dad.
Where on earth have you been?
I've been in a movie.
After the release of Return of the Jedi, Warwick spent the next 2 years continuing to play Wicket in 2 Star Wars spin-off films focusing solely on the Ewoks. First, there was Caravan of Courage, an Ewok adventure. It involves a family that crash lands on Endor. The parents get separated from the 2 kids, who then, with the help of the Ewoks, set out to rescue their parents from a monster known as the Gorax. It was aired on ABC as a made-for-TV movie in 1984 and was hugely successful.
From the creators of the Star Wars saga, a world premiere presentation. Lucasfilm's The Ewok Adventure. Brought to you by Huggies, the diapers that help stop leaking.
I actually remember renting this from Blockbuster when I was a kid and loving it. I know some people complain about the Ewoks and criticize George Lucas for their existence, but really, this movie is great for kids. It exists in that strange canon of films that came out in the 80s. You know, those films that were for kids but had elements of darkness to them, like The Neverending Story or The Dark Crystal. In the follow-up film, Ewoks Battle for Endor, the entire family dies, leaving the youngest daughter orphaned and living with the Ewoks. In addition to the Ewok movies, George Lucas even asked Warwick to make a personal appearance as Wicket at his own daughter's birthday party. Kids loved these Ewoks, man. With his mother acting as his manager, Warwick continued to get jobs throughout the 80s. He was one of many little people to play a multitude of goblins in the 1986 film Labyrinth. There's another one of those dark 80s movies. Because his face isn't seen in the film, it's hard to determine which goblin he was. He mentions in his book that he played 2 of them by the names of Bumphot and WW2. Your guess is as good as mine. He also ended up playing several characters in one of my personal favorite series of movies, a BBC adaptation of C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia. Although technically they weren't movies, they were part of a miniseries for British television. But to a young American kid like me, I first saw them on VHS when I was 4 years old, and I was captivated. In fact, that's exactly what I told my dad in an exclusive interview he conducted with me in 1992.
Oh, what's your favorite video you like to watch right now? What's your favorite video?
The Chronicles of Narnia.
Well, what? The Chronicles of Narnia?
Yeah.
Goodness, that's good.
I used to watch them on this little TV next to my bed. They're on that shelf somewhere. I must have watched these 100 times. In total, the miniseries covered 4 of the books: The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and The Silver Chair. Warwick played a talking mouse, Reepicheep, in Prince Caspian and The Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
I to understand that this singularly discourteous person is under your majesty's protection.
And he also played Glimfeather, a talking owl in The Silver Chair.
Parliament should know that these young humans were sent on this noble mission by the great Aslan himself.
He was so good in both of those parts, and I know some people might look at these costumes nowadays and think they're laughable, but when an actor like Warwick throws all of himself into a role and plays it with such conviction, you buy it, especially as a kid. Warwick would actually play another role in a later adaptation of Prince Caspian that Disney produced. Although he and the rest of the cast did a good job, I didn't like these adaptations. Sure, they had better special effects, but I don't know, something was missing. Anyway, off topic. Another big milestone for Warwick in the 80s was when actor-turned-director Ron Howard had him audition for the lead in a fantasy adventure film called Willow. The story, written by George Lucas, concerns a young dwarf who struggles to protect a baby from the forces of an evil queen.
You need a warrior for a job like this. I'm a nobody. Laura, you don't want me.
Not only was this Warwick's first lead role, but it was also the first time the audience could actually see his face. According to Warwick, Willow had the largest casting call for dwarves in film history, even more than Return of the Jedi or The Wizard of Oz. And there are a number of recognizable dwarf actors in this film, like Phil Fondacaro, who I personally recognized from the movie Troll, or Tony Cox from Me, Myself, and Irene and Bad Santa. It did reasonably well when it came out, and over the years it's sort of achieved cult status. This really is a great family movie. I had never seen it, and it was interesting to watch, especially after being bombarded with a lot of George Lucas criticism and hate for the past decade.
George Lucas raped our childhood. George Lucas raped our childhood. George Lucas raped our childhood.
People forget that Lucas has done some terrific work, even apart from Star Wars. When he combined his talents with the likes of Ron Howard or Jim Henson or Steven Spielberg, some really great films came out of it. Also, while on the set of Willow, Warwick met the woman who would be his wife, Samantha Burroughs, also a little person, but with a more common form of dwarfism known as achondroplasia. They got married in 1991. Warwick and Samantha also wanted children, but it wouldn't come easy. The first 2 children they had, Lloyd and George Davis, both died shortly after they were born. Warwick and his wife came to learn that it would be difficult for them to have children. Here's how it works. Warwick carries a gene for his type of dwarfism, SED. His wife carries a gene for her type, achondroplasia. When having a child, there's a 25% chance that their child won't carry either of those genes, and as a result would end up being born without any form of dwarfism. That's why some little people can have tall children. Then there's a 50% chance that their child would carry just the SED gene, or just the achondroplasia. Lastly, there's a 25% chance that their child would carry both genes, which, unfortunately, is fatal. When that happens, the fetus is identified with double dominant or homozygous achondroplasia. And this is exactly what happened to them. Twice. Hearing Warwick talk about this in his book is heartbreaking. It's an awful thing to have happen to a couple, and I can't imagine what they've been through. It was right around the death of Warwick's first child that he received the script for a tongue-in-cheek horror comedy film called Leprechaun. He needed the work, and the film served as a proper distraction for him and his wife after all they had been through. They flew to LA together as he filmed Leprechaun for 3 weeks. So let's talk about Leprechaun. This movie was a lot of fun. He plays an evil leprechaun that's trying to get his gold back and kills a bunch of people in the process.
I want me gold now!
Sure, it's corny or campy, but it was made that way. It's really self-aware.
What have you done with my wife?
Oh, the poor lass. I should have told her to watch her step.
The film is also known for starring a then-unknown Jennifer Aniston. When he spoke to Ron Howard about making the film, Howard advised him not to make any more. Warwick would then return to play his role as the Leprechaun in 5 more sequels: Leprechaun 2, Leprechaun 3, Leprechaun 4 in Space, Leprechaun in the Hood, and Leprechaun Back to the Hood. In each film, Warwick's character would kill various people trying to get his gold, only to die himself at the end in different ways. He's thrown down a well, stabbed with a crowbar before exploding, set on fire by a flamethrower.
We'll share it. I promise. Share this, pal.
Ejected into space before exploding. And drowned in wet cement. The more recent ones, Leprechaun in the Hood and Leprechaun Back to the Hood, were made after producers behind the film learned through research that the Leprechaun films were really popular with African Americans. And thanks to that decision, we got this.
I come from the land of the Irish Spring. Dublin's the place where I learned my thing. From the Emerald Isle to your place in the hood, I'm the man of green, come to do no good.
Warwick loved making these films, and you could tell he relished every moment he got to play the Leprechaun. It just looks like he's having fun in every scene. During his stint as the Leprechaun, he played a much nicer leprechaun in the family film A Very Unlucky Leprechaun. A little tangent here, but I wonder how other little people would feel about playing a role like this. Think about it. You're a little person. You've fought all your life to overcome obstacles, both mental and physical. Maybe you put up with some bullying here and there. Finally, you become an actor, and you want those real meaty lead roles that other actors get, but because of how you look, you end up playing the Leprechaun. It's hard for me to put myself in his shoes. He's just so leprechaun-y. She put a bag over him. I don't know, I get the feeling from reading his book that Warwick didn't care, and was more than glad to put all of himself into any role he got. He probably didn't see this as demeaning or anything like that. It was just another chance to do what he loved to do. It reminds me of a quote that was floating around a while back from Peter Dinklage. He talked about how he hates the word lucky. It cheapens a lot of hard work. Living in Brooklyn in an apartment without any heat and paying for dinner at the bodega with dimes, I don't think I felt myself lucky back then. Doing plays for $50 and trying to be true to myself as an artist and turning down commercials where they wanted a leprechaun. Saying I was lucky negates the hard work I put in and spits on that guy who's freezing his ass off back in Brooklyn. So I won't say I'm lucky. I'm fortunate enough to find or attract very talented people. For some reason I found them, and they found me. It sounds to me like Dinklage was probably more selective about the roles he went out for. I guess this is a universal struggle for any character actor. I know it's something I think about sometimes. Like, as a heavier guy, do I try and hold out for roles that speak against my type and have more depth? Or do I just take any job I can get? I guess it depends on how much of a struggle you're willing to put up with. Or maybe it's a dignity thing. Personally, I don't really care what job I get. I just want people to stop confusing me with Jonah Hill. The struggles that little people who become actors inevitably face was probably all the more prevalent to Warwick when he ended up starting his own talent management company for little people, Willow Management, in 1995 with his father-in-law, Peter Burrows.
I knew Peter when we were on Return of the Jedi. When I was 11 years old on my first film, Peter was there, also playing an Ewok.
They're still around today, and if you're producing a film with little people in it, especially in the UK, they're the first place you go. Additionally, they have a separate department at Willow Management called Willow Tall, in which they manage actors who are really tall. There's no one below 6'9" in that department. Warwick continued playing roles in the fantasy genre throughout the late 90s and early 2000s. He had a small part in Gulliver's Travels.
Am I, or am I not, the smallest person in the kingdom? Can any man look up to me? I'm a shrimp, a worm, an ant, a tadpole, a grub.
The New Adventures of Pinocchio.
Find your way to Neptune's underworld, where strange sea creatures defy description.
Why don't you give them some of Madame Flambeau's elixir? Make these freaks normal.
People don't pay to see normal, do they?
And he was also one of the 7 dwarves in a reimagined telling of Snow White called Snow White, the Fairest of Them All. And hey, look who he worked with. None other than Vincent Schiavelli, who I focused on in episode 2.
We have a job to do. We have to find the gnomes.
I'm tired of doing their chores.
What chores? I haven't seen you do any of their chores.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, you two, knock it off.
Standing at a height of 6'7", he played one of the dwarves seemingly out of pure irony. I admit, when I first saw him, I laughed. It's a good sight gag. Then in 1999, George Lucas dusted off the Star Wars franchise and made Episode 1 The Phantom Menace. Warwick was brought on board, and he ended up playing 4 roles. First, he played Wald, a childhood friend of Anakin's.
Oh, no, you're okay, Annie.
He played a random spectator during the pod races. He walked through the background of a scene as, well, who knows? The only reason he was even in this scene was he was just hanging out on set one day when he wasn't working, and George Lucas sent him to makeup, made him look different than his other 2 characters, and had him walk in the background. Coincidentally, Warwick was photographed that day along with the rest of the cast. After the photo was released, Star Wars fans apparently all debated who Warwick's mysterious character was and how big a role he would play in the film. They called his character Grimy. Lastly, during reshoots, Warwick served as a body double for Yoda so that they could get some wide shots of Yoda walking around. Although this isn't the actual footage, this is where you would have seen Warwick had George Lucas not replaced the puppet with CGI. Then, a couple years later, Warwick cemented his footprint on the fantasy genre when he auditioned for the role of Professor Flitwick in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Don't forget the nice wrist movement we've been practicing. The swish and flick. Everyone? Swish and flick.
In addition to Professor Flitwick, he also played the Goblin Bank Teller.
Mr. Harry Potter wishes to make a withdrawal.
And does Mr. Harry Potter have his key?
Warwick would continue to play Flitwick throughout the rest of the Harry Potter movies, but later on they made him look completely different. I wonder why.
You do realize, of course, we can't keep out you-know-who indefinitely.
That doesn't mean we can't delete him.
He even sounds different. He doesn't sound like an old man anymore. Well, it turns out Warwick did explain why this happened. He said, "When it came time to shoot Azkaban, there was no mention of Flitwick in the script. However, the producer still wanted me to be in the movie, so he asked if I would play the role of choir master. Of course I said yes. When it came time to shoot Goblet of Fire, the director Michael Newell said he liked the look of the choir master, and from that moment the character became known as Flitwick." Now that's a little odd, I guess, but whatever, it worked. Also in the last 2 films, Deathly Hallows 1 and 2, he played Grip Hook the Goblin, who was previously played by Vern Troyer, aka Mini-Me, in the first film. I wonder why they had Warwick play Grip Hook instead of bringing Troyer back. My guess is that J.K. Rowling wanted a completely British cast, which is something I've heard, but I can't say for sure. I think what probably happened was that Warwick had been working on these movies for over 10 years at this point. Production was probably just so comfortable working with him that they decided to give him the role. In addition to the Harry Potter films, some other notable roles he had in the 2000s include a dwarf MC in Ray.
Now, I got something special for all you satin dolls. And I don't mean Oberon's Big Thunder.
And Marvin the Robot in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Although Warwick was in the actual robot suit, Alan Rickman voiced the character.
Life. Don't talk to me about life.
He also did a couple low-budget horror films, one of them called Small Town Folk.
Those who go to Groggerton never return.
And another called Skinned Deep. Well, never seen that before. There's one more important part of Warwick's career that needs to be mentioned, and it goes by the name of Ricky Gervais.
He's got a little suit on. Yeah. We could get you something like this, couldn't we? A little furry outfit or something.
No, I've done the furry outfit.
I knew he'd like you. Yeah. I knew they'd get along.
After creating the award-winning The Office in 2001 with his co-writer Stephen Merchant, the two started on a new series, Extras. Ricky Gervais plays Andy, a struggling actor who's trying to work his way up the ranks in the entertainment industry. The series is known for having big-name actors play warped versions of themselves in each episode. Some highlights include Kate Winslet giving advice on how to give proper phone sex.
I'd love it if you stuck your Willy Wonka between my Oompa Loompas, something a bit fun, a bit jokey. And then you can get more hardcore.
And Patrick Stewart describing a strange screenplay he's been working on.
Well, I do other stuff, like I'm riding my bike in the park, and this policewoman says, "Oi, you can't ride your bike on the grass," and I go, "Oh no," and her uniform falls off, and she goes, "Ah!" and she's trying to cover up, but I've seen everything.
Warwick, along with fellow Harry Potter cast member Daniel Radcliffe, played themselves in an episode in the second season. There are so many great moments in this episode. I love the little snippet we get of whatever fictional film they're shooting.
Wood Elf, why do you cry?
Blow as I might, my flute makes no sound.
It's especially funny when you watch the blooper reel.
Wood Elf. Sorry, I'm laughing. Sorry.
And without my music, the birds cannot sing their morning song. This is serious.
And in Gervais and Merchant's writing, they take every chance to touch on Warwick's size and the awkward social situation surrounding it. My favorite part is when Warwick and Gervais's character get into a fight.
Trying to steal my fiancée?
Right, okay, I don't know what you're
You shit! What are you doing?
What are you doing?
What do you think I've got this ring for?
I don't know, you're a hobbit?
You fat
I
shit!
don't know what the rules are for fighting. Let me try that one. That usually works in cartoons. What's he doing, mate? Oh, no. Accidental knee.
After this, Warwick and Gervais became good friends. Not long after Extras, Warwick approached Ricky and Stephen with an idea he had for a show starring himself. They loved it, and together the three of them created the mockumentary show Life's Too Short. Warwick plays a self-absorbed, egotistical version of himself, and the show pokes fun at the struggles of being a little person in the entertainment industry. There are some great moments in this show, like when Warwick doubles for a child in a film with Helena Bonham Carter, which some little people actually do, by the way.
You cannot have courage without fear. I want you to remember that.
Then I must be a brave man, for all I feel
I'm
is...
sorry.
Cut.
I can't have his face staring at me either.
Or this scene where Johnny Depp is going to play Rumpelstiltskin, and he hires Warwick to teach him how to be a dwarf.
Faster. Fucking give me passion!
In every episode, you can just tell that Warwick has no problem poking fun at himself. Although I will say the only thing funnier than watching the show is watching the behind-the-scenes footage and promotional videos of Ricky just taking the piss out of Warwick.
So what was it like, filming on Life's Too Short?
Oh, every day was an adventure, to be honest.
Look at him! He's dressed as a fucking frog!
Yeah.
Then Ricky and Warwick worked together a third time on a series called An Idiot Abroad, a travel documentary show starring Ricky's oddball friend Carl Pilkington. The first time Warwick was in an episode was when Carl went to visit a dwarf village in China and called Warwick to tell him about it.
Hello?
Is that Warwick?
Yeah.
Hey, it's Carl, Ricky's mate.
Oh yeah, alright. Yeah, what are you up to?
I'm looking at a dwarf village and I wanted to run the whole sort of concept by you, because I know that people at home get a bit funny about, oh, you shouldn't be, having a little dwarf village and all that. Just thought, it sort of covers me if I speak to you and say, I'm at a dwarf village, and you go, yeah, I've heard of that, it's nice, good on you.
No, I have heard of it, definitely, but I don't think it's nice. I think it's terrible, Carl. I can't believe it. You don't know who's behind the scenes running that. Did you meet them?
Yeah, there's a king. So if all your work dries up, they're not making another Star Wars, you can't dress up as a little monkey, you've got no money coming in, you wouldn't think about coming here then?
Definitely not.
After 2 seasons, Carl said he wouldn't do it again unless someone went with him. So Ricky got Warwick to tag along. Warwick was a great contrast to Carl. He genuinely wanted to enjoy the trip and relished every moment. And Carl was just miserable. It also helped that just to aggravate Carl even more, Ricky and Steven would give Warwick the best hotel rooms and put Carl in the shitty ones. The two of them attend a French masquerade party, they act together in a Bollywood film, and they climb a huge flight of stairs to see a Buddhist temple. If you ever get the chance, check this show out, it's great. So what is Warwick Davis doing nowadays? Well, he definitely keeps busy. First off, he continues to act. At the time this episode was made, he recently had a part in Jack the Giant Slayer, an episode of Doctor Who, and he just attended the premiere for the independent film Get Santa. Also, on October 16th, 2014, after making a big announcement on his website, he's confirmed that he will be involved in the much-anticipated Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. IMDb doesn't list exactly what part he's playing, but judging from how versatile he can be in the Star Wars universe, it could be anybody, or anything. Additionally, Warwick created his own web series called Dwarves Assemble. You can check it out on YouTube. He also founded the Reduced Height Theater Company. Now this is cool. The theater itself is scaled down for dwarf actors so that nobody's short, and he can put on any play he wants. From February to mid-May of this year, they put on their first show, a production of See How They Run. Warwick has also written a book, Size Matters Not, which I used to make this episode. He's currently hosting a revived version of Celebrity Squares, and on top of everything, Warwick continues to keep himself busy opening doors for other dwarf actors at Willow Management with his father-in-law, Peter Burrows. As far as his personal life, he's still married to his wife Samantha, and they have 2 healthy children, Annabelle and Harrison, and apparently they're all represented at Willow Management.
Hello, my name's Samantha Burrows. I am an achondroplasia. I'm 4'1". I live life and love life and enjoy life to the full.
Hi, I'm Annabelle. I like roller skating. I've been in Panto, now in the 7th Ward in Manchester. Hello, I am Harrison. I'm playing a goblin in Bring Got Spanked, and I'm pushing the ball. Now I'm like, I can't believe I'm in Harry Potter.
Recently, he was part of a reality show with his family called Weekend Escapes with Warwick Davis, where he just traveled and had a great time with his family. He seems happy, and he should be. He's accomplished so much in his life, and he has a family to share it with. His story certainly isn't over yet, and I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that I'm eager to see what else he does. And Mr. Davis, I was going to try and say this in Ewokese, but they don't even have enough words for it apparently. Good luck, and may the Force be with you.
Isn't this? I wonder if I can still do this. Oh yeah. See, I've got it together much better than I did in the film. All right. Oh, check!
See if you can hop up the stairs.